Hello. Can you hear me? Oh, I see.
Hey, hi.
How are you?
How are you? Can you hear me?
Yes. How are you guys doing? I don't know. Should I dress up for the meetup? What do you think? Can you hear me?
Hi, Kaushal.
Hello.
Hi, Kaushal, right? Is it? I'm pronouncing it well. Kaushal.
Yeah, it's
I'm
Kaushal.
not able to hear you. I think you're mute.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think my voice.
Sujata, you?
Kaushal, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you, Sujata.
Okay, like 3 more
Sujata,
minutes.
I like your background. I'm gonna copy it.
Yeah, that's nice. I don't want to use any background because I want to make sure that internet connection will be as fast as it can, you know. Just don't want anything to spoil the quality of the meetup, if you see what I mean.
Can you hear me, Kaushal?
Yeah. I can hear you, Sujata. How come there's two of you, Sujata?
Alright guys, I'll start the broadcast. Let's make sure that it works. Okay.
Okay.
And why do this?
Oh.
Can you hear me or not? Oh, you can hear Pavel. Okay.
I can hear you, but looks like Sujata is not hearing us. Sujata, can you hear me?
Sujata, yeah. Just in case, guys, we're already on air, so make sure that you understand this, right?
Yeah, there's also two of Sujata somehow.
Okay. Can you stop sharing screen for now, if you don't mind?
Hey, Pavel.
Hi, Ed. Great to have you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm also right. I mean, as I can be, right? Let's wait for one more person, right? And get to start. And I suggest I would make a small introduction of the FHIR meetup because we perhaps might have some more listeners than usually attend our meetups because you know, now we are global to some degree. So I would like to speak a little bit first about what we do here, and then I'll give the words to Sujata and Kaushal, okay?
Mhm.
And I think it would be great if we are all here will be very active, because this time we don't have an opportunity for people from the audience to be as active as we are here. So to make it interesting and interactive, let's participate. And I hope Kalyan will join shortly. Yeah, and if Sujat, if you can stop sharing the screen, I think we'll start with a small presentation about the meetup itself. Yeah.
Looks like Sujata's having audio issues.
It looks like she's muted.
Well, the good thing is you guys are two of you, right? So if one of you cannot present, I think the other one will pick it up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Let me text her. I'll be right back.
Yeah. So I wanted not only be like.
I can hear you.
Oh, you
I can hear you.
Can you stop presenting for a second? Hi, Kalyan. How are you? Let's check your audio so we can hear you.
Can you hear me, guys?
Yes.
Can you hear me now? All right.
Yes.
Everyone.
Hi there.
Yeah, so we have like quite a lot of like 75 people watching on YouTube. So I think let's start our presentation. I would again, if Sujata can stop sharing screen for a second, I can share mine and talk about the meetup a little bit.
Got it.
All right. Okay. See, so here we are, all of us, right? Okay, let's small presentation, just introduction of the meetup. So hi everyone. This is our FHIR meetup, and first I want to speak what exactly we are doing here. And it's very simple. FHIR community has a great presence online. Everybody knows about FHIR developers chat, and perhaps many participate and contribute. So we organized health dev meetup group to have actually offline opportunity for engineers to meet, promote FHIR and interoperability, discuss problems they have, discuss solutions they develop. And so we've been doing this for a couple of years. But so this thing happened, COVID-19. I will try to avoid this subject as much as I can, because I think it's a lot of information and I'm definitely not the expert. But anyway, we had a meetup scheduled with Roche, Sujata and Kaushal were supposed to host it, and was scheduled on April 23, and then so it got cancelled, the offline meetup. And so we decided that yes, it's a problem, but there is an opportunity. We decided to go online. And even though, yes, we're missing this face-to-face conversations and networking, I think on the other side, it's a great opportunity to reach a big audience, more people. Hopefully we'll get back to offline meetups, but we'll also see how this one goes. It's the first one, so I hope everything will be all right. But I'll definitely collect feedback after the meetup. Now, a couple of other organization things. Please comment on YouTube. I also created a public Telegram chat with a very simple link you can see. Just join there, send us a message, and be as much interactive with us as you can. That will be helpful. Usually, every FHIR meetup, I try to give an update what happened over the last couple of months, 2-3 months, whenever we have it. And so I put one slide this time again. One thing is everything goes virtual because of the known reasons. FHIR Dev Days, huge FHIR event supposed to happen in Cleveland, June 16-18, has gone virtual. FHIR Connectathon, May 13, May 15, gone virtual. Health Samurai organizes FHIR Startup Conference. I don't know if it's going to be virtual. So far we don't know. I want to mention about these two events, FHIR Connectathon and FHIR Dev Days. It's a problem that events gone virtual, but it's also an opportunity. Both of the events became cheaper than it was before, and I think like FHIR Connectathon is $100 to $150 now to participate, and anybody can join from the comfort of their apartment or house. So I think great opportunity. Maybe use it. I think it would be very, very useful. Couple of other announcements. What happened over the last few months? HL7 announced a FHIR Accelerator project. And one project I noticed is CodeX. I haven't heard about it. It's about oncology data on FHIR. I wonder if Sujata and Kaushal can talk about CodeX. Do you guys know anything?
Yes, we are aware of it.
Are you gonna touch it in your presentation, because you're talking about oncology data on FHIR, right?
We are going to refer not the codex part, but the M-code part of it.
Okay, well, I would love to learn more about this. The other event, which I think huge, ONC and CMS in March, they finally released the final rule on patient access API and interoperability. I will talk about this as the last presentation. And Kalyan, it's a big thing for Google, right? So Cloud Healthcare API became generally available, right?
That's correct. Yep.
I think it's a big deal, and the global company offering FHIR infrastructure for general availability. I'm sure we hear about this from you. Anything else, guys, you can add?
I just want to say from the Google side, we're actually very excited about the meetup. We're happy to be here. We're just excited about the acceleration in the community in general about FHIR. I'll talk about some of that in my presentation, but this is great. Thanks for hosting and thanks for inviting us.
All right, thank you so much. So a couple of more things about the FHIR meetup. Help is always welcome. We're looking for organizers, co-organizers, sponsor hosts, hopefully. Very soon we will need hosts again. Thanks, Roche, for agreeing to host us this time. It's not your fault that this happened, right? But thanks so much. We're always looking for speakers with interesting topics. This is a community-driven meetup. We try not to refuse anyone from presenting, and more people are using FHIR. So please reach out, be active, offer us a presentation, and we'll have you here. My contact information, but it's also in some emails, so I will not pause on this. And our first speaker today is Sujata and Kaushal with Roche, and they will speak about oncology data on FHIR. They will introduce themselves better, I'm sure. So I'm stop sharing my screen, and please do. Please share yours.
Hi everyone. And thanks, Pavel, for arranging this. Let me share my screen. Yeah. Thank you. I'm Sujata Patil, an engineering leader driving FHIR terminology work at Roche. I have spent over a decade building complex healthcare solutions and have navigated my way through DICOM, HL7, and now FHIR. I call them three musketeers of healthcare industry. We all meet them sooner or later in our health tech journey. As the first speaker of the evening, it's my pleasure to warm up the crowd and set up the stage for fantastic line of speakers. I know Q&A sessions won't be that interactive, but please feel free to post your questions. We will address them towards the end of the session. And I would like to take a moment and give a big virtual applause to Pavel and Health Dev Group for organizing this stay-at-home event. And of course, to all of you for joining and defeating all the odds against it, showcasing the true strength of FHIR community. Joining me today is my dear colleague, Kaushal Parekh, a true gem. He is our principal health data architect, leading FHIR genomics and data sciences track, and indispensable member of our Roche team. I couldn't think of any speaker better than him to navigate us through intricacies of oncology data elements and its structure. Thanks, Kaushal. So even though, just a minute, it's technical glitch. Yeah. Even though Roche is a market-leading pharmaceutical company with 97,000 employees and a global presence, it is little less known in US. So let me give you a brief history and overview of Roche. Roche was founded in 1896, so when Queen Victoria was ruling United Kingdom. Today, after 124 years, with an achievement of 3 Nobel Prizes, 37 FDA-approved breakthrough therapies, and 7 FDA-approved device designation. We are continuing our mission to advance the standard of medical practice and contribute to progress in healthcare. What makes us unique is the fact that we hold the market-leading position in both pharmaceutical and diagnostics under one roof. So Roche not only helps diagnose, but also helps treat and prevents patients' medical condition. That's impactful and very inspiring. Genentech is our affiliated company under the Roche umbrella. Our global footprint, like you can see, we are spread across 29 R&D sites worldwide and 23 manufacturing sites. If I could zoom in, we have 3 main locations in Bay Area, California. One is in East Bay, Pleasanton. Another is our where the Genentech is located is South San Francisco, and our Santa Clara location, which is in the heart of Silicon Valley. Yes, we are hiring, and we are looking for right talents and leaders to guide us in this digital transformation and personalized healthcare journey. Our software teams, which I'm part of, is tasked with building modern software solutions, cloud-based software solutions with latest, greatest, and exciting new technology stack. So please join us. It's a fun team to work with. And above all, Roche has a wonderful culture which nurtures its employees and inspires them to speak up, innovate, and thrive. We have around 17 open positions in our group, from entry level to the leadership position. So please visit our LinkedIn site or our career site for more details. As I'm talking about this, about the group, the Roche, I'll just wait for the slide to transfer. So went ahead. Okay. So Roche DIS is Diagnostic Information System Group, which is formed under umbrella of Roche Diagnostics, is focused on building clinical decision support applications, helping patients and doctors navigate through complexities of medical information. Our future vision is to build the CDS applications with the help of Navify data platform, which would aggregate the relevant information and transfer this huge amount of data into actionable insights. So transforming the landscape of personalized healthcare industry. I want to take a step back and say now more than ever, we echo the need for such transformations. In the midst of COVID-19 pandemic, we are seeing the more knowledge, data, and research shared across the globe. We can see scientists collaborating at a global level to come up with the AI model based on the information publicly available by various countries. And we know cancer is not stopping. Similar collaboration would help beat it sooner. So upon extending on that topic, I would like to showcase the complexities of cancer care and cancer data. So I know I'm going to pick a very heartbreaking story of a Jane Doe, but it's a good case study to portray a complex scenario. So first time Jane was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2014. As they do, doctors order typical workup involving scans, labs, underwent imaging studies, blood work. Then she underwent a pre-op chemo followed by a lumpectomy surgery in 2015. After being cancer-free, she followed the routine checkups and medication to keep that cancer in check. But in 2019, her cancer relapsed and got spread in liver. So she underwent a second line of treatment. In 2020, there was a second relapse, and there was new growth in the liver, and the cancer spread in her bone. During this time, there was more genomics testing and more blood work followed, and she's undergoing a third line of treatment. The rectangles cover the diagnosis of cancer, a model in which the cancer is diagnosed. And as Jen was stressed by a life-changing cancer diagnosis, and now being overwhelmed by responsibility of choosing the treatment plan out of multiple proposed options. A more data-driven decision backed by research showing efficacy of treatments on the cohort of patients similar to Jane's age, race, and stage would surely help her pick a more appropriate treatment, right? And also put her mind to ease by being more confident about her choice. Jane is a brave soldier. Still, this treatment journey must be very emotionally and physically draining. Nevertheless, it is fairly challenging to meaningfully capture all of the Jane's diagnosis, the treatments she underwent, medication she took, the surgeries she went through. As you can see in the slide below, we see the physician notes, labs, radiology images, and chemotherapy and targeted therapy billing information is part of her history. So gathering this information from the various sources, multiple sources, and creating a longitudinal view, which can be shared and then fed into a research data pool for further analysis, which will help the patients just like Jane Doe. As we are talking about the data, let's see the challenges we are facing today from reaching our goal of data-driven patient care. There are 1.7 million new cancer patients each year in United States alone. Only 3 to 4% of these patients go through clinical trial, where the data is meticulously collected and the patient progress is tracked. The other 96% undergo treatment at various clinics, hospitals across the country. The data is scattered across various systems, and it is spotty, not always the high quality data. Not having access to this data is a big missed opportunity for learning about the treatment, his efficacy, and overall disease in itself. The main reason behind this data loss are the lack of standardized data models, advanced technologies to access it, and a standardized way to capture this data into those models. Now imagine if for these 96% of the patients, the standardized data is collected in high quality way and fed into a research database systems. Don't you think we'll be closer to our future of truly personalized data-driven care? Yes, we will be. So since we are dealing with the data, I will hand it over to our data architect, Kaushal, who will go in more details about why we are using FHIR to model this data and how are we capturing it in a standardized way. So Kaushal, to you.
Thanks, Sujata, for translating. We'll try to let you share the screen, and we'll coordinate. So yeah, our goal at Roche DIS, like Sujata said, is to build data-driven clinical decision support application software products, and our focus, at least initially, is on oncology care. So we want our applications to have one consistent source and view of any patient data that we're dealing with. We want to be able to future-proof our choices against interoperability and other regulations that are coming, and we'll be talking about later this meetup. So why choose FHIR? We chose FHIR for that reason. It's an international cross-functional consensus-based standard that's been developed with a solid foundation to support healthcare interoperability, support representation of various different data domains that you might encounter, and yet is flexible enough that you can tailor it to your use cases. Right, so I know a lot of us here probably no one understand FHIR, but still a very high level overview is nice. And like sometimes I forget that all of these resources exist within FHIR, right? It's made up of like the two core components, the FHIR resources that lay the groundwork of representing various information models and business cases in the healthcare domain. Allow you to set up constraints and terminology validation, etc., for how to represent your data. And usage is driven by standard RESTful APIs and standard ways to serve, authenticate, secure, manage, transfer your data. So it creates a solid foundation that people can use to build software applications and worry about building the applications right rather than building that infrastructure. All right, so if you want to go next slide, please. But yeah, FHIR is because it's a consensus-driven standard. It's based on the 80-20 rule, right? It really covers 80% of the use cases you might encounter in any healthcare setting or use case. But the 20% is up to you. We as implementers of a interoperable FHIR-based CDS application ecosystem will have to customize FHIR and extend for our use cases. When we get to oncology, when we got into Roche DIS adopting FHIR, we also realized that, and this was a year ago, and we're much further along in the community now, that there were very few implementation guides for how to deal with oncology data and how to represent it in FHIR. And that requires for us to build a really solid understanding of the clinical domain, go through logical modeling and profiling exercises, pick the right resources for the right type of information. And it is not easy. So I wanted to show a couple examples of what we went through. So if you can go to the next slide, Sujata, please.
Yes. It's a technical glitch. Give me a minute.
No worries.
Come on. Okay. Oh, we are directly. Okay.
We're going through the slides backwards.
Okay.
That's fun.
I know.
All right. So, coming back to our example Sujata was referring to, right? The patient went through several rounds of testing, several rounds of chemotherapy medications, rounds of surgery, etc. And at each step in that time, data were being generated and information was being captured in different places. If we were to take all of this and represent in our FHIR resources, we have to still start at the basics, work with our clinical domain experts, and understand their logical mental model of these relationships. Right, the fact that the patient has a disease, a cancer, and the disease goes through various stages. So Jane went from having stage 2 cancer to stage 4 cancer over time. And cancer spreads, right? So we know that there's usually a primary tumor where the cancer starts, and it has a specific location in the body, and it has a histologic type, etc. But when it spreads, what's called a secondary or metastatic tumor, those go into other locations too, and those need to be tracked. So if you're collecting all this information and putting them in a model, you would need to represent all of these clinical entities and concepts and relationships between them. So how do you do that with FHIR? We took a stab, and again, these are really oversimplified examples, but just a basic example of representing the cancer condition and the stage and the site where it's located involves some making interesting choices, right? So these are actually FHIR resources, right? And FHIR value types and field relationships. So you can model a patient in FHIR. You can model a condition in FHIR and associate it with the patient. You can give the condition a specific body site location. And in the case of tumors, you can represent those as body structure resources with a given morphology, which you can code, a given location, which you can code. You can model the stage as a observation resource as well. And you can find observation codes using coding systems such as SNOMED. You can invent coding systems that don't exist in any standards to create your own sometimes, where we had to represent the AJCC cancer staging codes, but there are no standard codes out there. So you could invent one. So again, FHIR allows you to do a lot of different things, and a different person would have chosen to represent the same information in a slightly different way, based on use cases, based on other clinical input. So FHIR is a standard, but you can use the standard to do the same thing many different ways. So as a application developer or as an organization, you still have to profile your own use case and stick with it. And there are some very new interesting tools, more and more in the FHIR community. I just recently, in the past few months, picked up the FHIR shorthand, and I'm loving it. So that's something I recommend looking into if you haven't. But in addition, right, there are especially for our oncology use cases. When we started out, there were not a lot of implementation guides out there except for the HL7 breast cancer implementation guide. And that was a really good resource. It gave us a lot of ideas for how to do this, but it was tailored to breast cancer when we wanted to build a more general cancer use case. So we went down the path of understanding a generic use case that's not cancer specific. And more recently, in the last, I believe this came out last May, ASCO, which is the American Society for Clinical Oncology, they came up with the ENCODE initiative and a FHIR implementation guide on how to represent all the different kinds of data domains that you might encounter in cancer. And even there, as we look into the representation, we often find that most of what ENCODE does is the perfect match for what we need to do, but not always. So you still need to come up with your own specific use case, relying on these external standards and initiatives, so you do not reinvent wheels, but have to do your own profiling. Next slide. And I wanted to pay some special attention during this talk to just clinical terminologies as well. This is something Sujata and I have, and our engineering team have worked on over the last year or two as well, building our terminology service foundations to enable enable our data use cases. And it's also a complicated beast. There are a lot of standards out there, and yet there's not enough standardization, right? You have to deal with different countries, different jurisdictions, different hospital systems will use their own terminologies. So you need to be able to recognize and understand them, yet map and translate between them. If you can get it right, you can use it for some advanced analytics and start getting into being able to drive named entity recognition and natural language processing out of unstructured text like clinician notes and reports and whatnot. And you can enable, if you model your terminology ontologies right, you can use them to drive some powerful querying on your aggregated data sets as well. But one thing that if we all, as I guess a FHIR development community can avoid would be free text. And I just wanted to emphasize that in the next slide, that you can create a nice application with a nice UI and be able to allow users to enter information and present it. But if you leave those data capture boxes as free text, you're going to have a huge mess on your hands, right? So you can have the same disease be represented many different ways. They all mean the same thing. But if you have free text, you have lost. Right? If I wanted to query this database and say, show me all patients who have lung cancer, how will you know these 4 patients for whom you did data entry are the same, are facing the same kind of disease? On the other extreme, adopting coding standards is not easy either. And an equally head-exploding scenario is on the next slide. When we get to it, is when you're dealing with coding systems and you're trying to represent disease characteristics using clinical codes, right? You have this is a very, very small part of SNOMED CT. It has over 30,000 codes, but just focused on the cancer disease, right? The breast cancer example we're dealing with. Then there's ICD-10 and ICD-03 and many other standards, and they're all intermapped and interrelated. You could say breast cancer is carcinoma of breast or malignant neoplasm of breast, or you might post-coordinate it into 2 subfields and say, this is a malignant epithelial neoplasm abnormality with the location of breast or with the location of upper outer quadrant of breast. And each one of these things will have its own code. So if you're building applications where you need to aggregate patient data from different sources and different levels of granularity, your applications need to be aware of these semantic relationships between these codes so that you can do the right groupings. So if I didn't scare people away, these are the next slide. I listed also a few resources, terminology standards that us in the healthcare FHIR community should all be familiar with, right? There's SNOMED, which is kind of trying to be the one ring to rule them all. There's LOINC that's used for lab tests. There's RxNorm that's used to encode medications, FHIR itself has standard value sets that are used for internal FHIR business rules. There's RADLEX for radiology terminology. There's ICD for billing codes. In the area of oncology, there's ICD-03 and NCI Thesaurus and NACER and AJCC. So having a good handle on these is key to managing your healthcare data well. And then that kind of going back to going back to early days of oncology, the first oncology drugs in the 50s, and development of more targeted oncology drugs that came with their companion diagnostic tests to say if you pass the test, then you can take the drug and it'll work for you. Going through the Affordable Care Act, bringing the digitization of our healthcare system, but creating a lot of different standards to more in the present day where people are really starting to get into ensuring interoperability between systems and democratizing the healthcare data. Hopefully, we'll get to a world where we build these interoperable systems that truly enable patient-centric, data-driven, personalized healthcare. So yeah, I'll give Sujata a couple words here as well before we get into Q&A.
Sure, Kaushal. I totally resonate your thoughts, and having this patient-centric, data-driven value-based care would enable all our patients to get better lives and get in better health.
Yeah.
So, Pavel, do we have any questions?
Well, I have questions for you, right? So, yes, guys in the audience, please again post questions to Telegram chat or to YouTube. So, for me, two questions. First, what do you guys do to share your data models and profiles with other organizations, perhaps pharmaceutical companies, somebody else which work with oncology data, maybe large health systems would be interested in doing this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think we haven't yet made concrete plans of publicly sharing our work. That is something as individual engineers and developers and architects we are always interested in, and we also work within the framework of a large corporation. So that's something we're figuring out, but we definitely would love to be more engaged in the FHIR community, and this was our step one to even kind of share what we're doing and why we're doing it, and we hope to work with the broader community and participate more, and then hope that this leads to collaborations.
The other question would be, can you please elaborate a little bit on your experience with FHIR shorthands? I know about the projects, very interesting.
So FHIR shorthand, I've been having fun with it in the last couple months. So I actually learned about FHIR shorthand because I was looking into ENCODE, and the ENCODE implementation guide was built using FHIR shorthand, and until recently I had been struggling to find a good way to document our FHIR model decisions and profiling decisions, and it has been a really cool experience to use FHIR shorthand. The language is straightforward. It's truly shorthand. You don't have to type out JSONs or fill out spreadsheets or hand edit big XMLs. So yeah, it's been fun, and the automated process to take your FHIR shorthand and turn it into a live functioning implementation guide is actually a breeze. So we haven't done a lot of work with it, but I'm really looking forward to using it to at least build out our implementation guide internally for our own development teams to use. And hopefully we can share that experience at some future point as well. It's very early.
So it can produce implementation guide, right? You said.
Yeah, exactly. It produces a if you go to any implementation guide that's publicly posted on the web on HL7, you can use FHIR shorthand to produce something that looks just like that. You still have to do the profiling work and define your profiles and extensions and resources and examples and whatnot, but makes that process really easy.
Okay, let me try to read the comments from the audience on YouTube. Did the team try UMLS technology to understand mapping between terminologies?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, UMLS is also another source of, and I unfortunately I forgot to mention it in the list, but yes, that is a standard source of cross mapping between these, and that's something that you would have to use when you're navigating this for sure.
Doug is asking what geographical region and hospital networks have the best interoperability with the FHIR standard, perhaps?
I don't know. If other people know about those, then I would love to go work with them.
Yes, true.
I will say this is Ed, that they tend to meet what the major EHR vendors tend to meet the policy, and
Right.
they all tend to meet the policy because they have to by law.
Right.
It's sort of a.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to our last talk today to see what the new CMS proposals will do to this, and I'm really looking forward to that changing this environment where truly democratize the data that are hidden in all these hospital systems.
Amor asking what would be the best place to start with synthetic oncology data? Interesting question. Does Cynthia have anything for oncology or?
I haven't found good synthetic oncology data that have been pre-FHIRized for you. If you find some, please share.
Okay, very good. Let's so Andre in the chat says that yes, Cynthia generates M-code patients, so it seems to be I don't know, Kaushal, did you look at Cynthia from Mitre or not yet? Or
yeah, we have looked at Cynthia from Mitre. I think the challenge with those also is how to find examples that match some of the complexities we're dealing with. A lot of the data elements we were looking at, right, like the histologic type, the detailed staging, the key characteristics that go into making clinical decisions for cancer care are often not present in a discrete structured format in many of these data sets. So it would require further processing, etc. So you'll find a lot of synthetic data sets with general demographics, medications, even diagnoses codes, etc. But when you get into the detailed attributes that are key in cancer decision making, those are not always present in an ideal structure or format.
okay, well, thank you so much. There are some other questions on YouTube. There are quite a lot of them. I'll ask Ed and Kalyan. Do you guys have questions for the speaker?
No, I'm good.
I'm good too.
All right, well, let's take just 1 minute break and we'll move to the next presentation. I believe the next you, Kalyan, right?
Yep, I'm going to try to share my screen right here.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, is everyone able to see my screen?
Not yet. Do you guys see Kalyan's screen? I don't, right?
I don't see it yet.
Yeah, not yet.
Oh,
Yeah.
There he goes.
Now we're good. All right, it's all yours.
All right, so you can see my screen, right?
Yeah.
Excellent. All right, so let me get started. So first of all, thanks, Pavel, for organizing this and inviting Google to share some of our work here. Sujata and Kaushal, it's really exciting as to what you guys are doing on oncology. And I should also thank Sujata for setting it up as the three musketeers, HL7, DICOM, and FHIR, because I'm going to talk about some of that in my presentation. So by way of introduction, my name is Kalyan Pamarthy. I'm one of the product managers at the Cloud Healthcare Group in Google, which is part of Google Cloud and part of Google AI recently. I'm the product manager for our modalities in the healthcare API. So HL7 and FHIR is what I product manage. I've spent the last 15 years in various parts of healthcare IT, remote patient monitoring, medical devices, and also building consumer enterprise applications of machine learning in healthcare. So today there's three main areas that I want to cover. The first one, I want to quickly introduce the Google Cloud Healthcare API and where it fits in the healthcare work that we're doing at Google. And but I want to zoom into the FHIR capabilities of the healthcare API. So I'm going to go through how do you set up the healthcare API, what are some of the interesting concepts of FHIR in the healthcare API, and then switch over to some of the themes that we're hearing from customers. And we're seeing a lot of excitement about FHIR. We have been over the past couple of years, but recently because of the CMS ONC regulations, we're starting to see some real world large scale applications of FHIR on Google Cloud. So I'll talk about that briefly. And then I'll try to tie it all together with some end-to-end machine learning scenario of how FHIR and the various other parts of Google Cloud play together. So just so everyone understands how Google Cloud Healthcare fits into the larger Google mission, I've put the mission of Google and the mission of Google Cloud Healthcare side by side. So on the left, you'll see, some of you may be familiar with with Google's mission, right? So it's to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. The words in blue are highlighted on purpose, right? Because each of those words has a special meaning to what it means in terms of like products and services that we build. So world's information is about organizing and managing data. Making it accessible is allowing others to unlock the power of their data and then make it useful, right? And so we've got an analog in the Google Cloud healthcare world, which is organize the world's health and life sciences information, right? So this is making data open, accessible, and interoperable, right? And then how do we make it accessible, right? With open standards and APIs, open standards being building to HL7, FHIR, DICOM, for example, and making it secure. So security is a core tenet of Google Cloud. And with healthcare, there's, I think, an even higher responsibility in terms of maintaining privacy and security of the data. And useful is about, how do you unlock the value for various applications? And these could be patient management applications, or it could be advanced machine learning AI algorithms. Right? So healthcare has been a priority at Google for a long time now, right? So we have in Google Cloud a large team of engineers, researchers, product managers. A lot of them have clinical backgrounds. So we've got MDs, PhDs, nurse practitioners, and folks from all walks of the clinical, coordination of care spectrum. And what we're trying to build is products and solutions that help large enterprises and startups and ISVs move to the cloud and be able to build applications in the cloud in a scalable and secure fashion. We've got a large suite of healthcare-specific products in Google Cloud. The Cloud Healthcare API is the one that is most relevant to the conversation today. But we've got APIs around genomics processing in the cloud. We've got healthcare-focused API management products with Apigee. And we've got toolkits for helping organizations stand up healthcare regulatory compliant infrastructure, right? So we've got special templates around, how do you build up, for example, HIPAA compliant infrastructure. We've got products that help companies manage datathons, right? I mean, bringing data together into one place and allowing researchers to use that data. And then I mentioned privacy and security briefly earlier, but as Google Cloud, it's really important for us to be compliant with regulatory requirements in many different areas, especially in healthcare. We're HIPAA compliant, we're high trust certified, and then there's a whole bunch of other certifications. And we're constantly trying to add new ones across the world where they're needed. So with that introduction to Google Cloud and where healthcare fits in Google Cloud, I want to jump into the Google Cloud Healthcare API. So the Healthcare API is our primary API surface for managing healthcare data in the cloud. Right? It is standards compliant. So we allow solution builders to work with FHIR, HL7, B2, and DICOM. And with FHIR, we support the three popular, commonly used versions of FHIR: DSTU2, STU3, and R4. The Healthcare API is a fully managed service, right? And serverless, what it means is that solution developers and our customers do not actually have to manage the infrastructure layer, right? So they can use the Healthcare API, and all the setup management of the infrastructure layer automatically happens for them and is running on the Google Cloud platform. So all the security, privacy, the scalability, regulatory compliance of the Google Cloud platform comes for free while you use a service like the Healthcare API. So in addition to supporting standard-specific, what we call modalities, so FHIR, HL7, and DICOM, we're also building value-added capabilities, right? So we understand that just providing a standards-compliant infrastructure is not sufficient for our customers to implement real-world use cases, right? So we're starting to think about what else happens before and after the FHIR or HL7 part of it, right? And so we're thinking of things like de-identification for researchers to use the data in FHIR, for example. We're also thinking about analytics use cases, right? I mean, how do you build easy connections from, say, a FHIR server into BigQuery, so you can run SQL-like queries on FHIR data. We're also thinking of all the other systems that interact with a FHIR server. For example, HL7 adapters that send data to HL7 stores, and there's a notification trigger, and we have a transformation, for example, into FHIR, right? So we've got a robust notification system that customers can use to subscribe to everything that's happening around the FHIR store and perform downstream applications. Right? So the end goal of all of this is to help our customers build solutions faster, right? So we want to enable data interoperability. So customers with different types of data formats can bring them all together in one place in Google Cloud, build web mobile applications, think about analytics, and also think about machine learning models. And how do you close the loop with the data management and the application layer so information is all safe and secure and powering all the various applications. Right. So as Pavel mentioned, the last couple of weeks have been busy time for us. The Cloud Healthcare API has been in beta for about a year, and so last week we published a blog highlighting some of the work that we're doing in the Healthcare API, also related to COVID-19. But the Healthcare API is now generally available. Right? It is a pretty significant milestone for us. And many of our large customers are already using the Cloud Healthcare API. So if you've not already checked out the documentation, strongly recommend everyone to go check it out on our website, cloud.google.com/healthcare. You'll find a lot of information in there about how to use FHIR, HL7, and Diacom. And if you dig into FHIR, it's a lot of use cases and docs and guides. Okay, so let's dig into the FHIR API as part of Google Cloud Healthcare, right? And so as you all probably know, there's two technical roles in healthcare IT that FHIR is serving, right? So while FHIR wasn't designed to be a persistence layer, it has great value in its use as a data model, right? Because of its highly structured definition of various data elements, constraints, etc. And so we're seeing a lot of customers gravitate towards using FHIR as a data model. So FHIR is also an API specification, right? I mean, it's great that it standardizes how data can be accessed, and developers can build on FHIR without having to learn of any server-specific implementation details. So in the Cloud Healthcare API, we're supporting both of these uses, right? So FHIR is a data model and FHIR is an API specification. So before I jump into some examples of how FHIR data is actually used, I wanted to give everyone a sense of how data is organized in Google Cloud. So we've got, so project is the main defining boundary in the Google Cloud ecosystem. Right? Project is what defines the network boundary. The project is where you set your access policies and other any business rules that you want to set up, right? So it's the logical container for isolating various resources in Google Cloud. So the Cloud Healthcare API is turned on at a project level, and once the Cloud Healthcare API is turned on, you can define which location in terms of which region or zone that you want to operate your infrastructure in, and then there's the idea of a data set. A data set, you can think of it as a collection of different FHIR stores, right? And the ultimate unit of where the FHIR data is stored is what's called a FHIR store or a FHIR data store, right? So if you think about it in the reverse order, each FHIR store has your data specific to one or more use cases. You may want to define multiple FHIR stores to separate your data out within a data set. And then you can have multiple data sets for separating out maybe different business units or different use cases, and in one or more locations, right? And so the core idea of where the FHIR data is stored is a FHIR store, and you'll see the next several slides talk about how we access FHIR data from this FHIR store, right? So another way to think about it is, in more traditional databases, data is persisted to disk in the form of, for example, a relational database, and then there's a way to access it with a query language such as SQL. Right? So in the Cloud Healthcare API world, the analog of that database is a FHIR store, and the analog of SQL is for FHIR APIs. So the first thing that customers and solution developers do on the healthcare API is create and configure a FHIR store. So it's very simple. You can create it with just one API call. But we offer a lot of customization in terms of what you can do to configure the FHIR store. Right? I mean, we understand that not all use cases are the same. For example, how do you want to treat updates to FHIR resources when there isn't a resource already available? Right? How do you want to treat referential integrity when we're referencing multiple resources in, let's say, in a bundle transaction? How do you want to deal with resource versioning? And how do you want to set up, let's say, pub sub notifications? And how do you want to how do you want other systems to subscribe to notifications that come out of the FHIR store? Now, once you configure the FHIR store, we wrap that FHIR store with lots of different APIs, right? And many of these are FHIR standard APIs that we implement, and some of these are healthcare API specific method calls that we've implemented because there's a need for it, and the FHIR standard doesn't actually define it, right? So let's go from left to right. So on the left, you'll see two boxes for import, right? Streaming and bulk. So, in addition to being able to access the data, I think really important is how the data gets into the FHIR store in the first place, right? A lot of our customers have data from other systems, either on-prem or in the cloud. And so we have methods that allow customers to bring data into the FHIR store, either as a bulk load or as a streaming transaction. And then if you look at the top box, it's various methods and how you interact with the FHIR store, right? So you can create FHIR stores, you can read it, you can look at all the FHIR stores in your data set. You can change the configuration of the FHIR store. You can also change how you set up pub subtopics on the FHIR store. At the bottom, you'll see two boxes, right? So one is for de-identification. I'll talk about de-identification in more detail, but we see a lot of use cases in which, particularly in research, where our customers don't want applications to be accessing the FHIR data in its existing form, right? So they want it to be de-identified and use a de-identified copy for research purposes, for example, right? So we've got de-identification methods that take this data in the FHIR store, strip out all the PHI, and create another version of it, also in the FHIR format. Right? And then on the right, we've got export functionality. Again, this is similar to the import, where we know that FHIR sometimes is not where applications and processing ends. Sometimes data has to be sent out to other formats. So we've got streaming and bulk exports to, for example, BigQuery, where you want to do analytics. And we've got about, I think I have it on the next slide. And so we've got about 80 plus methods that we implement. A lot of them, like I said before, for the FHIR standard. So being able to access resources, being able to search, patient everything operation, for example. And so we've got a lot of those in there. I'd encourage folks to go look at the documentation because we won't have time to go through every single method here. And so for many of you who've been working with the FHIR spec, I'm sure you understand the concept of a base URL, right? And then you perform your various operations on the base URL. So we have a base URL definition that is basically a combination of, what is the API version? Is it the generally available version? We have beta and alpha versions too, and so we've got more functionality in the beta version and in the alpha version earlier in the development process, of course. What is the project? Which region the data is situated in? What is your data set identifier, and what is your type of data and store, right? So a combination of all this is what creates the base URL for a specific FHIR server. So what happens is, let's take the example of a large provider system. They're using the healthcare API to as their FHIR server, right? And so they go in, they set up a new FHIR store in a specific location, let's say US Central. They call it patient analytics FHIR store, and they say the type is FHIR, and they have a store identifier, right? So that combination is basically the base URL for any queries that run against that provider system's Firestore. So let's look at some examples, right? And let's look at a simple example first, just getting patient data from a cloud Firestore, right? And so as you'll notice in the GET request there, the healthcare.googleapis.com, v1 project ID, that's all the base URL, right? And then after that is a standard in the FHIR REST API call, like /patient/1. So the basic idea is once you know what the base URL is, you can run any of the standard FHIR operations that we support against that base URL. So more complex example, something I was mentioning before, is de-identifying the data set, right? So we've got two options. We can take an entire Firestore and de-identify it. And we've got some standard rules about how we de-identify data. For example, stripping out patient names, location information. But we've also got configuration on how do you handle PHI data, right? So you can set a configuration that says, don't make the patient name empty, instead fill it in with asterisks, for example, right? And so you can run an API call, give it your source data set, and then say de-identified, and all the data in the source data set is de-identified. So all the PHI is either stripped out or transformed to another version, and that's now available for sharing with the research team, for example. We also have the option of doing it resource by resource. In addition to, sometimes you don't want to de-identify the entire story, you want to de-identify a specific resource. So here's an example, right? So on the left is a non-de-identified FHIR resource, and on the right is a de-identified FHIR resource. So you'll notice here it's a good one. So the given name is stripped out, right? So the family name is stripped out, and then the gender has gone from male to unknown, right? So that's an example of how the resulting de-identified patient resource would look after you de-identify the operation. Okay, and another example is what we commonly see in analytics, right? And so typically customers have brought in their data from other sources. Either they've transformed it into FHIR, or the data exists in the FHIR format, it's loaded up into the Firestore, and now they want to do some quick analytics. You could possibly run a lot of search queries on the Firestore, but as all of you know, FHIR wasn't optimized to do large-scale data warehouse type analytics on it. And so we have taken the SQL on FHIR analytics approach and built transformations that take FHIR data and create BigQuery tables, right? And so there's really nothing that needs to be done from a customer standpoint outside of calling that API to send the data over to BigQuery. And you can run SQL queries on BigQuery. And for example, in this case, the original FHIR data has been transformed into the BigQuery schema. This is SQL Analytics, FHIR Analytics schema. And then if you want to find patients who've got an average heart rate of greater than 130, you can run a familiar SQL query and get that data out of BigQuery. So those are some examples of how you would either make REST calls or transform data into another schema and use it for analytics. And finally, going back to the topic of privacy and security, every operation that happens on Google Cloud resources is logged from an audit and transparency standpoint. So the same thing happens in the healthcare API. Anytime there is an access of a FHIR resource, a Firestore is created, method calls happen. All those are logged in our Stackdriver, which is Google Cloud's logging and monitoring tool. So that gives our customers another way of looking at what's exactly happening with their data. So that was a quick update of all the different things that happen in our FHIR API. How do you create Firestores? How do you run? How do you call REST methods? And how do you translate the data into for analytics purposes? So I quickly wanted to cover, what we're hearing from customers and what our future directions are in terms of FHIR. Okay? So, we've been thinking about FHIR for a few years now. We've been talking to a lot of customers, and so we think there's a transformational change going on right now in terms of how customers are thinking about their own data sets, both from a data model standpoint, but also reacting to some of the regulations that are coming up, right? So here's 6, I'd say, hypotheses of how this will play out. I'm going to go through them very quickly. Happy to take questions. So the first one is, there's a lot of existing systems of record, right? So EMR systems, patient management systems, existing data warehouses that have been built over the years. And so they serve important purposes for our customers, right? And so we don't see them going away at any point, right? So this is not we don't believe that all of a sudden these existing systems, which have been around for 30 odd years, will suddenly become FHIR stores in the healthcare API. What we do think will happen is data will be extracted from those systems and transformed into what we're calling a secondary data repository, right? So this is a common pattern that we're seeing. Customers want to keep their existing systems as a system of record, but now think about FHIR as a data model and as a way for applications to easily be able to access the data that was previously hard to access from these systems of record, right? The second thing that we're seeing is happening more and more is API-based data interoperability, right? We're seeing a lot of this being accelerated by the ONC and CMS regulations. There will be a demand from application developers and consumers to make data accessible from what was locked up in the systems of record, and so customers will be forced to think, and solution developers will be forced to think about how to use FHIR as the standard for opening up some of this data. Right. The third thing is that we're seeing a lot of what we call digital natives, right? So these are new age companies that do not have systems of record, but a lot of this is happening in digital health and in the startup ecosystem. Companies that are now trying to figure out what their data model is, and starting on FHIR is a very attractive option for them. So I think we'll see a lot of those new age digital native companies build their systems on FHIR. It's related to the fourth point. FHIR will become the global standard. It is by far the leading contender for application developers, at least the ones that we're talking to. Right? And then number 5 is the managed services approach. Right? I mean, it is there's a lot of applications out there that take advantage of FHIR, but the customer needs to manage the infrastructure, manage the security and privacy. And there's elastic scaling, but you still got to define what kind of VMs, for example, that you want to pick, and what kind of operating systems and databases that you want to run. So we believe that as more and more applications are built and larger volumes of data is running through these systems, customers will move towards a managed service approach, right? And which is why we're very excited about the managed service capabilities in the Cloud Healthcare API for FHIR. And then finally, but also equally importantly, the idea of all the data coming together and being interoperable will unlock a new wave of AI applications. We're seeing some of our customers starting to think beyond data aggregation, right? I mean, bringing data together is still a very important part of where the customers are in their journey towards modernization. But given that FHIR is starting to play that role as a consolidated data format and an easy way to access data that was locked in other systems before, many of our customers are starting to think of what next, right? Is large-scale analytics, large-scale, how do we build our machine learning models, and are the managed services for machine learning models. And so this move to FHIR is a big positive for the thinking moving towards more advanced applications. So I just wanted to double click into this idea of existing systems of record versus born cloud, right? And the pattern has started to emerge very clearly for us through many customer conversations, right? And so the first customer model is what we're calling the born cloud organizations, right? So these have no existing infrastructure for managing clinical data. So, for example, they do not have on-prem EHRs that they need to extract data from. They do not want to define a new clinical model, right? I mean, they're starting from scratch. They do not want to get locked into a very business-specific clinical data model. And so FHIR as an option, as a data model is very exciting to them. They don't want to be in the business of standing up large engineering teams and writing large amounts of code to run the operation, right? So and again, we're seeing a lot of this in the digital health space, for example, where companies want to focus on what's bringing in business value and let a lot of like the data definition and API management be handled by a FHIR server. Again, they don't want to manage their infrastructure, right? So companies believe that they'll have millions of end users and customers, but do not want to be worried about on-call or the infrastructure issues in the middle of the night. We're also seeing a lot of focus on mobile first, right? It's not only web applications, but mobile and machine learning applications are also become important. So in this model of like born cloud, companies are very attracted to FHIR as a data model, FHIR as a data access pattern. They really don't have a lot of existing systems that they need to think about. And the customer model too is typical of the large organizations that we work with, right? So payers and providers, pharma companies. There's a lot of existing systems at play. It's not as simple as saying, let's start fresh with FHIR as a data model and build going forward. So EHRs is a good example. There's a lot of data and applicability of EHRs in the current provider workflows. And then not all EHRs have easy ways of accessing data. Right? So the idea of the secondary data repository comes into play here, as to how do we help our customers parse the data out of these existing systems into a format that they can quickly build applications on, or allow others to build applications on. And so in this customer model, FHIR servers are coexisting with existing systems, right? And this is where FHIR server is actually a secondary longitudinal clinical data repository. So I put this up as an example of a system architecture that we're starting to see with some of our customers with this secondary data repository idea, right? And so I'm not going to go into all the parts of this, but there's on-prem systems, primarily EHRs, other systems of records. They could be imaging, for example, PACS systems, other data warehouses that data is coming through. Data usually flows through either a claims clearinghouse or an integration exchange, and is coming over into the cloud, right? I mean, now we're starting to talk about the secondary data repository in the cloud. There's a lot of Google applications, for example, Google Cloud Storage, the healthcare API, FHIR APIs, that allow these data parts of the data to come in, eventually landing in a FHIR store, for example, right? Where FHIR is the chosen data standard. And then towards the right is a whole bunch of downstream value-added services and applications, right? So the data can be de-identified, like the example I had before. Consent on the data can be managed. The data can be exported, for example, to BigQuery to do analytics on it. Or there can be machine learning models built on the data with the predictions being fed back into FHIR. Right? And so there's this coordination happening between the on-premise system and the Google Cloud secondary data repository. So new data is coming in, streaming, being stored in the FHIR store, being exported to applications and other systems. And both of this on-prem and cloud systems coexist. So that was a quick overview of the patterns we're seeing, where we think, how we think the future will be. And I want to just give a quick example to tie this all together with the various pieces, right? So a typical application that we see is the machine learning space, but with FHIR as a data source, right? As a data standard. So we've got customers who are trying to build machine learning models. They set up Google projects in the Google Cloud Healthcare API, set up a FHIR store. They've got an existing machine learning model. So in this scenario, it's a risk assessment with heart rate as one of its features, right? And then a new patient comes in. They're having their vital signs monitored in the clinical setting. Data is being generated, being sent as an HL7 message into the cloud. A transformation is happening into FHIR resource, and machine learning models are being run. New predictions are created and stored back in the FHIR server, as well as sent back to the EHR. Right? So that's a common scenario of bringing data into the cloud, running some analytics and machine learning models, and sending the outputs to what else. Right? So quick schematic, basically the same thing I described. We can bring the data in through HL7. We've got MLLP adapters. It's possible to write transformations from HL7 to FHIR in the Healthcare API, given a particular schema. The FHIR store allows, like I described, the storage and access of data. And when a new data point comes in, for example, in this case, a heart rate observation, we have cloud functions that are triggered to run the machine learning model, make the prediction, and then send the data back into the Healthcare API as well as to the clinical source, say in EHR. Right? So that's how some of our customers are bringing together all the different pieces. So with that, I'm done with the formal part of my presentation. There's a lot of information on our website, including how to get started, how to import data from various sources into the Cloud Healthcare API, how to access resources, as well as how to export it. So I strongly encourage everyone to go check it out. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Thank you, Kalyan. I will have questions from the audience, but first I want to ask Ed, Kaushal, Sujata, do you have questions?
I have one.
Go ahead.
Kalyan. On the de-identification, how do you guys handle attachments with potentially identifiable information in those? Do you always strip them off?
Yeah, so I believe that's one of our configurations is to how to handle the information. I believe you can do the same thing as you do with other resources, but I'll have to double check. But I believe that's part of the configuration.
Thanks, Kalyan, for a wonderful presentation on Firestore, and looks very promising to build the solution on top of it. Can you explain in your last workflow, can you explain more about the EHR relay? It seems like it's converting HL7 into FHIR.
That's correct, yeah. And so there's a couple of use cases, right? So we can handle, so similar to a FHIR store, we've got an HL7 store in the Healthcare API too, and that stores HL7 messages. So we convert it into a friendlier JSON format. And we've got the option of customers specifying their own HL7 schema. Sometimes it's not the standard schema. And so an incoming HL7 message can be parsed and stored in the HL7 store. But then there's also the option of transforming that into FHIR, right? And again, we give the option of customers bringing their HL7 to FHIR mapping as well. And so that particular example assumes that we're using an HL7 to FHIR mapping, which we have a method called for the actual mapping to happen. And it's transformed into a FHIR resource, put into the FHIR store.
Okay. And does it apply to the streaming data as well? The streaming data?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then just to double click on that, we do have a version of the open source MLOP adapter that could be listening to messages that are coming from the source, right? And so that's one of the pieces that helps it actually convert it into our HL7 store.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Hey, Kalyan, this is Ed. Just a question for you. Are you seeing customers either building Smart on FHIR apps or CDS hooks applications on your platform?
I was just going to send you a message, Ed, saying we should talk about Smart on FHIR, but we are seeing some interest in Smart on FHIR. But I think there's a few customers who are leading the way in Smart on FHIR, and there's a lot of others who are starting to now think about it. So we're seeing various levels of maturity about Smart on FHIR, right? And we're thinking really hard about what does it mean for us to provide Smart on FHIR capabilities for customers who are exploring all the different use cases. And I expect we'll see more of those with the CMS ONC regulations and the opening up of data.
There are questions in the chat. A lot of questions are actually about the identification. People are asking what you do with unstructured data. Is it possible to customize the rules of the identification? Can you talk a little bit more on this?
Yeah, it is possible to customize the rules. And so with every de-identification setup, there's a whole bunch of settings you can tweak on how you want PHI data to be handled. So unstructured data is also being parsed for PHI, as I believe. But again, the same rules apply.
What do you do? Like you have HL7 to FHIR translation. What about CCD to FHIR?
So we currently don't have a CCD to FHIR. We are actively exploring what the options are with the community and then trying to find out use cases. So I'd actually use this opportunity to ask folks to reach out to me if there's interest in that kind of transformation. We'd love to partner.
Thank you. I cannot ask the question from, I think it wasn't the presentation, but I think it's Dr. Aziz asking what version of FHIR do you support?
Yeah, so we support R4, STU3, and DSTU2.
Thank you. Anything else, guys?
No, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Kalyan.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to leave folks with my contact information. You can find me on LinkedIn. So my email is kpamarthy@google.com. Feel free to reach out, ask questions. I'd love to stay engaged with the community.
Okay, thank you. So let's do a very short break, right? Because everybody needs break, and then we get to Ed presentation. So let's get back in 3 minutes, 3 to 5, let's say. Let's put it this way. So it's like 7:30. Let's start 7:35, and we'll go another two presentation from Ed Martin with UCSF, how UCSF is using FHIR for innovation, and I'll talk about the CMS rule for health plans. Okay. It's 7:35. Let's get started. Ed, you ready?
Yep, I'm ready.
And please.
Hang on just 1 second. All right, should I go ahead and begin, Pavel?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, hi everyone, and Pavel, thank you for inviting me to come talk tonight. My name is Ed Martin. I'm the technology director at the University of California, San Francisco's Center for Digital Health Innovation. And tonight I'll talk to you about how we use FHIR and Smart on FHIR and those APIs on some of our innovation and research projects. So this is what I'll be talking to you about tonight, just an overview of where I'm coming from, samples of our projects, and going into some detail about the types of projects that my team does. And then talk about the process that we go through to approve being able to do some of these digital health projects that use FHIR APIs and how that gets done at UCSF. So in case you weren't familiar with the University of California, San Francisco, we are part of the University of California system, part of one of the 10 campuses. We're one of 5 academic medical centers that's part of the UC system. And we are also the only UC campus that's focused on health and life sciences, and we have no undergraduates. We're one of the top research-funded academic medical centers in the country, and we do a lot of innovation, not just in digital health, but obviously in pharmaceuticals and lots of different health and life sciences areas. And we've got lots of products that we've licensed out to the private sector, and we have 5 Nobel laureates. The Center for Digital Health Innovation, where I work, what our goal was, and we were founded about 8 years ago, we do a lot of collaboration with industry and also with our faculty, our scientific innovators inside of UCSF to come up with lots of new novel solutions to improve the lives of our providers and for our patients. So CDHI, where I work, our portfolio really goes across the entire healthcare journey. As an academic medical center, we do ambulatory care. We also do acute care. We're deeply involved in precision medicine. And the areas where I'm tending to spend a lot of time in is around improving the physician experience and the patient experience. So on the ambulatory and virtual care side, because we do a lot of specialty, tertiary and quaternary, complex and acute care, we focus quite a bit on the process of just being seen at UCSF, because we have actually a higher demand for our services and for our physicians than we have the capacity to fill. And so we work on the process of what we call patient access. That includes referrals, being able to track where you are in the referral process, because it is as you'll see, it's a maddening experience. And just, really blocking and tackling when it comes to just the basics of being able to be seen at UCSF by one of our specialists. And then we also do some work around remote care and telehealth as well as part of our virtual care program. And around precision medicine, our former chancellor was one of the people that wrote the quintessential paper on precision medicine. It's about getting people the right treatment, to the right patient at the right time, using a lot of AI to uncover lots of different hidden insights against a lot of data and to be able to compare that for individual treatment. We're also starting to do a lot of work in AI and ML, and especially around imaging AI. We were the first institution to actually come up with an FDA-approved algorithm that is embedded inside of one of the GPE imaging scanners, and that was something that we were able to do in about a year last year. We do a lot of work with being able to do clinical collaboration, trying to improve patient engagement, and we've done some work around digital ICU monitoring as well as part of our inpatient and acute care programs. One of the big areas that I spend probably the majority of my time in is a new program at UCSF. It actually is a business transformation program, but we call it the digital patient experience. And what it is our team is actually leading this program in combination with a lot of other teams across UCSF Health. And it includes folks from our faculty practice, our clinical systems teams, which run the EHR, our IT teams, our other innovation centers, and our health informatics, and with the lots of other faculty across UCSF. And the goal for the entire digital patient experience is about creating a unified patient experience that use a lot of our existing technologies plus new technologies that we're coming up with and that we're partnering with a lot of startups to enable our patients and people that want to become our patients to be able to easily access and get care at UCSF. And really making it modern, making it much more empathic, and really a lot like what we see in other areas that we haven't seen in healthcare yet, making it delightful and personalized. And so that's a program that I've been working in for the last two and a half years, really, and it continues to go on. And it's part of the major strategy for how we go about improving the patient experience at our institution. And so we're looking at transforming the ways that we work and the ways that patients experience us at UCSF. And we've got three main programs. One is around patient access. And for us, that's really focusing on three different areas. To be able to digitize and centralize referrals. And by this, I don't know if you are going to be shocked by this, but the majority of referrals are still handled by fax machines. And so if you're referred to UCSF by your doctor, chances are it will have happened with a fax that was sent from your doctor to UCSF. But once we have that actually digitized, and we've done some work around that, which I'll show, to be able to automatically prioritize and route those referrals if something is urgent, to be able to surface that and make sure that you get seen right away. And then some of the other things that we're doing is enabling a lot more self-help in a modern and convenient way. So for you to be able to, once we get your referral, to be able to tell you, oh, you can schedule this appointment yourself with these doctors, or to be able to know where you are in the referrals process and to get reminders that you've got an upcoming appointment and you need to do all these things to get ready for your specialist appointment. The other area that we're tackling is around virtual care. And so this is the idea of being able to care for you remotely. Telemedicine is one aspect of this. But the other is even making sure that you're ready for a procedure that you may be coming to at UCSF, or post-procedure, making sure that we follow up with you electronically and to make sure that you're doing the things that you need to do after you've been seen at UCSF. And a lot of what we also need to be able to do is be transparent about the process. It is often a big mystery for some of our patients to know sort of what's going on, what they need to do, what the results are. And it's a terrible experience for many of our patients in terms of the anxiety that causes by not knowing where they are in the process. And so that's something that we're trying to relieve. And then last, we call it Portal, but really what it is it's about providing a unified experience around communications between UCSF and to our patients. And so what we're trying to do is to actually design a unified experience across both getting care at UCSF and the care that you receive in a way that is actually works across whatever tools we may be using, whether it could be something as simple as the patient portal, or it could be with like SMS messaging to send you reminders, to email notifications to tell you how what you've got to do post the COVID-19 cancellation of your last appointment. So it's things like that that we want to be able to have a much better understanding of how it is that we are reaching out to our patients and to our potential patients. So there's specific areas that we're looking to target as part of our solutions. And one of this is around essentially AI and machine learning and data science. And in all the solutions that we do, we want to make sure that we're instrumenting our processes to capture the data that we need to help us continually improve, as well as being able to automate a lot of processes that are being done manually. I talked a little bit about our operational transparency, just making sure that we've got data available to show to our patients as well as to our care teams to understand where they are in the process. We want to be able to do a lot more self-service for not just for our patients, but for many of our frontline workers so that they can solve some of their own challenges. We want to promote more interoperability across the partners and other healthcare institutions that take care of our patients. Patients typically get their care in more than one place. And so we're also looking to see how we can exchange information, exchange data, and seamlessly provide continuous care across those different boundaries. And this is actually where FHIR plays a big part in that is one of the keystones around that interoperability. And the other is looking to see as we think about the services that we provide and how we're improving them. It's not just about providing, like I said earlier, our healthcare is provided in lots of different locations across different institutions. How can we provide multi-channel access to our expertise and our services? And so these are the themes that we think about as we're creating some of these digital health innovations that we're looking to implement. And so it requires a big change. Healthcare, as you know, is pretty far behind. And for us, especially being at an academic medical institution where historically departments have been very siloed, we have to completely change the way that we're working. We're looking at trying to improve the customer experience, but there's a lot of things sort of under the surface that we've got to work towards. And a lot of it is making sure that we're working with sort of the best people, not just the clinicians, but also in terms of some of the developers, some of the systems integrators. A lot of it is it's not just about the technology; it's about changing our own business processes and how we execute. It's all about making sure that we've got the right IT architecture, the right data. In this case, making sure that there's a lot of interoperability in that data and in the applications that we build. And other things like, we rely on partners. We're sort of changing the mindset of the folks that we work with. It's hard to bring innovation to those that are not that innovative. And so that's actually a big challenge of what we do. And then really focusing on design to make sure that we can deliver that good user experience. And I talked about the business model and how we've got to change that. And what we've also recognized is that in order to be able to push a lot of these innovations forward, healthcare in general is influenced quite a bit by the national healthcare policy. And there was a question earlier about who provides the best FHIR APIs, and that was only actually enabled because of changes in health policy, and that's we set down these new rules from CMS and from the ONC. They become policies, and that's how change happens across the healthcare industry. So FHIR came out of that, Smart on FHIR, CDS hooks. There's a lot of people that have made that happen, and we in UCSF are constantly working with some of our federal healthcare policy to help guide some of the changes that happen, and it's a national effort. So what I'm going to be showing a lot of today are examples of Smart on FHIR, and I think I'm guessing most of the people here know what Smart on FHIR is, but if you don't, it is basically a way of creating reusable applications that run inside of the EHR, whether on the clinician-facing side or out of the patient portal, or even standalone applications and just using the EHR as an authentication mechanism. But then the apps that are created in using this pattern, this architecture, they're able to retrieve data from the EHR and, more importantly, be able to combine it with other data from different data sources. And so you can easily pull in and create tools that utilize external data and combine it with EHR data. So this has, applications in precision medicine and lots of different tools in clinical decision support as well. And this is the standard that we are using now to build many of the applications that I'm going to show you. And they are supported by all of the major EHR vendors. They support Smart on FHIR. So why this matters, interoperability has been one of the huge roadblocks to a wide-scale creation and adoption of digital health tools. And so this technology actually allows third-party digital health developers to create innovations sort of on the edges of the EHR. So it actually is quite difficult, I think, knowing how development is done of custom modules inside of Epic, which is the EHR that we use. And you can go a lot faster on modern cloud infrastructures like Google, like AWS, like Azure. And for us, it's all about being able to improve the physician and the patient experience and giving them the tools that they need to help improve healthcare and to improve the care process. So one of the first things that I'm going to talk about, and the first example is around our referrals automation. And this is the process that's called patient access. So just to give you an idea, and there's a bit of a lag here, UCSF focuses mostly on tertiary and quaternary care. So this is sort of like the toughest problems to solve by specialties. We get about 45,000 hospital admissions every year. We have about 2 million outpatient appointments every year, and I realize that there's a bit of a lag on the stream. And we get about 400,000 new patient referrals every year. And quite honestly, this being able to handle a lot of these patients, especially now, we had to cancel a lot of non-essential visits over the past month and a half, 2 months. And maybe for the next few weeks, but being able to handle appointments, people being seen at UCSF is about to become a huge problem if we have to do it manually. And so that's a lot of what we're talking about. People want to be seen at UCSF. You talk to people that have actually received care here, and they give such great reviews about their experience and the care that they received. But it's actually quite difficult to get the care at UCSF, and it's often an anxiety-ridden process. So the team at Roche talked about the example of a woman getting diagnosed with breast cancer. And so the way that it happens today is, if your primary care physician suspects you may have cancer, they will fax a referral over to UCSF. And what happens to that fax often in many of our departments, and this happens a lot in academic medical centers, it's not something that's unique to UCSF. But we receive that fax, and it may sit on the fax machine for a day or two, or maybe even more in some really extreme cases. But during that time, as a patient, you're really anxious because you want to know what's happening, and it can take days for us because it actually requires somebody to go in, look at that fax, enter that information into our EHR, and you wait, and sometimes it can take days, if not weeks. And we have to get more information about you, and we end up playing phone tag if we can't get a hold of you. And all of the information that we need to try to get from the patient is all done for the most part by telephone. And when they finally do get a hold of you, then you can actually get your appointment scheduled. And sometimes that can take a couple weeks. So there's, longer time for more anxiety as you're waiting to be seen. Once you get into the appointment, you get into the waiting room, you got to fill out a bunch of paperwork. And then finally, you get to see the specialist. And once you see the specialist, then you get a whole bunch of information that may be overwhelming. And it's difficult for you to manage. And this is what the process looks like for the most part today if you want to be seen at a specialty center. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to improve all that. We're trying to make it modern. The goal is the day that you, your physician faxes over a referral to UCSF, we want to be able to schedule you same day that we get the referral. And that's a huge, huge improvement. And so that in order for us to do this, we've got to create a bunch of different tools that remove all these manual processes out of people's hands and actually make it much more self-service, make it more automated, incorporate algorithms and machine learning into the process. And so that, end to end, this goes much smoother and there's a lot less anxiety and you get access to care much faster. So what we did for the first tool that we built is actually simple enough. It is an application that converts electronic PDF faxes into electronic referral records. Before we built this tool, it was actually a combination of 12 screens and swivel chair integration to copy the data from the fax into our electronic health record system. But we built this application that we called Fax to Referral, or Referrals Automation 1.0. This is a Smart on FHIR application, and so I've sort of blanked out the rest of our EHR screen, but this is a little button that shows up on the application when the referral coordinator opens up their Epic implementation. They click on this Referrals Automation button, and it opens up our web application that we created. All the faxes that have come in, and there's a bit of a lag here, but all the faxes that come into UCSF that are referrals get pre-processed so that we pull out the information that we can glean, the patient name, what they want to be seen for, who the referring provider is, what kind of information about the condition, if they have any insurance information, and all of that gets transcribed automatically. And what we do is we're able to then verify, okay, well, the information that's on the fax, how well does it match the information that's that's on our electronic health record system? And then on here, you see this little label called Apex. That is what we call our Epic implementation. It's our brand name internally for our EHR. But we can verify who the patient is. The referral coordinator, instead of typing all this information up, actually can then just check off and make sure that everything that shows up on the fax matches up what we have in terms of the record in the EHR. And so less data entry, this goes much, much faster. They click the create referral button and away it goes. We're able to create an electronic referral record inside of Epic. And so that's sort of the first part, the front end of our process to automate the creation of the electronic referral record. Now, in order to be seen at UCSF, we have a bunch of different specialists, and specialists see specific conditions. Just because you're an orthopedic surgeon doesn't, you've got specializations. You might focus on the shoulder, or you might focus on the knee. And so not all doctors can be scheduled for all things. And so part of another tool that we built, another Smart on FHIR application, is this tool that once we get a referral, you can actually then, based on the conditions that are on the fax, we can pick which doctors you should see based on the conditions. Right now, this is being done manually, but we have instrumented this so that we can start predicting based on your conditions which doctors you can see and what availability they have. And so what happens is the referral coordinator picks the doctors, sends this off. It sends a text message to the patient that says, hey, you've been referred. click here on this link, and we're actually using a third-party scheduling application from Luma Health, it opens up on their phone, and they're able to schedule. A doctor. So the app that we built to do this, that's running, is a Smart on FHIR application, custom built at UCSF. But we're also using a third-party FHIR API-based application from Luma Health, from a third-party vendor. And we've implemented this in orthopedics, and we've implemented some of these tools, the fax to referral tool, in some other departments. I can tell you the success that we've had with using these tools. Our backlog of referrals has gone way down to single digits in the areas where it's been implemented, where it used to be dozens, and in some cases, hundreds waiting to be processed. In orthopedics, for specific conditions that are sort of simpler to treat, we actually have hit the goal of the day that we receive the fax, we're actually able to schedule you the same day. So what's next for us? Well, there are lots of different, more complicated cases where we need a lot more information from the patient in order to be able to schedule you. And so we are actually building out now this mobile app, also going to be Smart on FHIR based, where if we need additional information from you, like, we need to remind you to bring your labs, or we need to verify your personal information, or if you need to provide your insurance card, that we can all gather this and make this self-service for you. And so that, we're not relying on phone tag in order to get the information that we need to get you scheduled. And all of this end to end, the goal is to make this as automated and as self-help as possible. And this is something that we're going to be working on this year. Another example is this app. Actually, this is predated Smart on FHIR, but we did use some APIs to create this. And we created a tool called CareWeb, which is basically an EHR and pager secure messaging tool. The physicians are able to send messages that are essentially tagged to a patient. And that message can go out and land either on the physician's pager, or in this case, to some of the nurses' phones. And because we tag the message, we can also then offer different views. We call it a wall, where it's different messages that you can actually view. So if you want to see all the messages about a patient, you can see it all on the patient wall, and it's going to be visible to anybody that is caring for that patient, that's on the care team for that patient. And then you can also look at it by sender or by recipient. And one of the nice things about this is you can actually send the messages directly from inside of the Epic. And so this is kind of what the early appearance of it. It's, you're able to send a message, and then you can send a page out, and it'll go out to pagers and to other devices. But what was nice about how we built this is that we actually integrated this into Epic, so that you could actually click on this first call button. So if there's something wrong with a patient and you need to get a hold of somebody, you could just click there. It'll bring up this application, and you could send messages. And it's kind of like Slack for patient care. And so we actually started this about 5 or 6 years ago. This is built by one of our hospitalists. His name is Dr. Roman Khanna. That's him pictured here on the lower left, just as a better way to send messages to pagers. And so what was very cool about this is that, we built the prototype, we ran it for a year or two, and then we were actually able to license this technology to a company called Volt, which created this app called Volt Story that they now commercially sell. And Volt was acquired by Hillrom last year, so this CareWeb tool, which is now Volt Stories, is actually available for others to use. But this was one of our first apps to really seriously start using APIs inside of UCSF and across Epic. And so a lot of the patient data, a lot of the care team data, and being able to see, I think we integrated some labs information in there as well, show up in the messaging. And then I'm going to shift gears a little bit here. This is talking about this application called Bridge. And this is one that is actually bringing the latest in clinical research to patient care. And it started out in our Memory and Aging Center at the Weill Institute for Neurosciences. They funded a lot of this across three different principal investigators, Doctors Riley Bove, Kate Rankin, and Stephen Sanders. They all created different diagnostic tools around neurology, and they wanted a way to be able to bring that information into the point of care when they're actually visiting with a patient. And so what they did was they built a Smart on FHIR application that actually pulls data from the EHR about the patient, as well as lots of different data sources into sort of one cohesive interactive dashboard. And so this has been live for about a year. It started out in neurology, but it actually has spread out to lots of different departments. And so what it looks like is there's a bunch of different widgets that they create for visualization. And we're able to aggregate data and do transformations, as well as processing analysis, contextualizing data from lots of different data sources, whether it's from our PACS, whether it's from Apex or our EHR, or survey data. TabCat is a tablet-based cognitive assessment tool. Lots of different sources to be able to present to the patient at the point of care. And just what the infrastructure looks like, we can deal with uploaded research data. We're dealing with PACS systems, different types of real-time process data, as well as real-time integration across different databases. Again, this is sort of what it looks like for the clinician. And again, I blacked out most of the stuff that's Epic specific, but there's a little link to click to bridge that's on the patient chart. They click on it and it brings up, and this is what the multiple sclerosis dashboard looks like. It pulls in some information from assessments, history, longitudinal history from the patient. It also can pull up imaging. You're able to compare your results across people like you in sort of a precision medicine aspect of it. The autism dashboard looks completely different, and it's configurable according to the use case that they want. But again, you've got the patient information up at the top, but that is the key to be able to pull the different information from the different tools and research databases that they have available, that the clinicians have available from their research. And this one is for neurodegenerative disease. Again, lots of similar information, but they're able to arrange the information that's most useful to them and for their practice. So that is the sort of just some of the examples that we've got. The other thing I wanted to talk about was, okay, we're using these new digital health tools using APIs, but healthcare is highly regulated. There has to be some guardrails around, okay, well, what tools can physicians use? And if they want to develop their own tools, how do they go about doing that? And so what we did in 2017 is we founded what we call the Digital Diagnostics and Therapeutics Committee. The whole point of this committee is to be able to evaluate these digital tools that people want to use for clinical care, and it's modeled based on our Pharmaceuticals and Therapeutics Committee. Same kind of concept is it's the governance for the tools that we want to be able to use for patient care. And if folks are interested, there is a paper that some of our clinicians wrote on this in the Annals of Internal Medicine. And so you see Dr. Khanna, who created CareWeb, and some of my colleagues in the Center for Digital Innovation, Drs. Auerbach and Neinstein. So why would you want to build using external tools versus trying to build in the EHR? And so I think with building external tools is, if you've ever tried to develop inside of Epic, the user experience is somewhat limited. And so by using external tools, you have a lot more capabilities than what you have on Epic alone. Also, if you want to combine both EHR and non-EHR data, this is really one of the best ways to do it. And also, if you're trying to build solutions that you want to be used at other health systems, the whole point of Smart on FHIR is that you can substitute them. That's what the S is on Smart, is substitutable across different health systems. And when I say that the cost of implementation can be externalized, that means that either we can partner with third parties to use tools, or in the case where we've built some tools, we're actually able to license them out to third parties that want to take advantage of some of our innovations that we built in-house. But obviously there are some risks as well. Many of the tools, many of the APIs that are in Epic and the other EHRs, most of them are read-only, at least the FHIR ones. They are, hopefully that's changing very, very soon to be able to do write APIs on FHIR. There's also a big concern at UCSF about creating shadow charts, meaning we don't want to create a shadow EHR system with duplicate records. It is a legal and compliance issue, and so that we need to make sure that RHR is the system of record for clinical care. And I think everybody's familiar with sort of the concerns around data privacy and privacy breaches. And also, making sure that there are standards of care that we're monitoring, and making sure that we know what's going on in terms of the types of care that's given. What do we do? What does the process look like inside of DD&T? And so really what happens at the beginning is there's usually some innovator's idea, and this is typically some faculty member or somebody working with a faculty member. They've got an idea and they meet with one of the clinical informaticists inside of the DD&T committee. And they answer a questionnaire, and the questionnaire gets reviewed by the whole committee. And this includes folks from our clinical systems team, integration. So there's a lot of technical, there's compliance, there's risk, there's different physicians, health informaticists, et cetera, that review whether or not they should move forward. And really what they're really voting to move forward on is, do we want to give them access to a sandbox that is essentially, it is a copy of our Epic instance that's got test data in it. That's not real data, and it's full blown in the sense that it's got interfaces, it's got APIs, it's got the client facing tools like Hyperspace, which is the clinician facing aspect of it. It's got the patient portal aspect of it, so you can actually test these applications against our implementation of Epic. But this is kind of where the DD&T committee stops, right? It's about allowing our innovators to test out their ideas to see if it works in a real Epic EHR environment at UCSF. And if they prove that it works and it works well, then they can talk about, okay, well, how do we get this into production? And that's a different governance path that they take. And there is a group called the Clinical Technology Governance Committee that if there are things that we want to bring into production, we sort of, as the DD&T committee, sort of say, hey, we give this blessing for this app. And, we think that it is something that could go to production, and they follow a different process from going from our sandbox up into production. And so, we've been at this since 2017. What does it look like today? In terms of our pipeline, we don't know how many ideas are out there, but right now, I just looked at this last night. There's 5 people that have applied to DD&T for new apps. There are 9 apps right now that are in the sandbox that are testing out their ideas. We've got 4 apps that are waiting to go into production. And things are sort of on hold right now because of all the COVID stuff. But we've got over 10 apps now that are live in production, that are Smart on FHIR or FHIR API based apps that are live. So not bad for the few years that we've been around. And I predict that there's going to be a lot more to come. And so that's pretty much it for my talk, and see if folks have questions.
Thank you, Edwin. So there are a couple of questions from the audience. First question is from Larry about scheduling. By the way, if you watched YouTube and compared to how you speak, yes, there is a lag between YouTube and your speaking, but audio and video is all in sync, and it's just a lag on YouTube, but your audio and your video should be fine. I'm pretty sure, and I asked people to confirm. So Larry is asking, do you have any metrics of like how many patients started self-scheduling right now? How happy are providers? What is their feedback? Can you share anything about that?
I do have those metrics. I don't know if I can share them publicly, but I will tell you there's a drastic improvement wherever we've implemented these tools.
That's a good response. Jose Maria asking, with the new CMS rule, patient should be able to provide access to their data over patient-facing API. How this process is happening, like registration of the apps at the UCSF?
You actually don't need to register them with UCSF. I mean, you have to be a UCSF patient. There are APIs, and in fact, there's a couple of apps that I've downloaded where I can point the app to UCSF, enter in my credentials as a patient from the patient portal, and I'm able to download my patient data set. I mean, the example of this is, if you've got an iPhone, right? Apple Health is able to download your data, and they don't actually register with. At least I don't think they register individually. Well, actually, I take that back. With Apple, they have a special relationship with Epic. That allows them to refresh data automatically from the APIs. But I have downloaded other apps where if you are, I think you may have to register with Epic, but you don't have to register with each institution. So if you are a UCSF patient, you can download that data automatically.
So the question is definitely not for the patients to register apps, but for the app vendors to register the apps, right? So they can use data. So the patients then later can use this app to access data. How are you happy in general with Epic and smartphone FHIR capabilities from Epic?
I'm sorry, Pavel, would you?
How are you happy with Epic's smartphone FHIR capabilities? Like, do you feel there are any barriers? I mean, there is a new CMS rule which is trying to address information blocking, and definitely ONC and CMS feel that EHR vendors are not as open as they should for third-party apps and sharing patient data. Do you have any experience, like negative experience maybe?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, we work with, not just from our standpoint, but from some of the vendors that we work with. Trying to get approved in App Orchard is a very long process right now for third-party vendors. And the rules keep changing and the capabilities are still limited. I talked about how we are trying to influence policy. When the rules were first, the proposed rules were first published, and there was that period of feedback that that the ONC wanted. I mean, we have a policy director at the Center for Digital Health Innovation at UCSF, and we actually do we do comment on the proposed rules, and we actually pushed for a lot more write capabilities and a lot more data to be exposed, and we pushed for R4 to be the standard for the new rule. We got some of the things that we wanted, but we didn't get everything that we wanted. As you guys have probably seen, some write APIs were supported, but there's definitely a lot more that could be done.
Very good. Thank you. The last question probably. Queen is asking, what are the biggest pain points for patients and providers with smart applications?
That's a good question. In terms of in terms of provider pain points, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily with Smart on FHIR itself, right? It's about how you design the applications and how useful it is. I think the thing that we're finding sort of making sure actually that we get correct is that where the apps are launched are actually in context of their workflow. Because if you make the app hard to find, it's going to be difficult to use. But nothing with the technology itself, that's actually gone pretty well.
Again, one more question from Vlad Epstein. Does UCSF work on anything to help patients and health professionals with COVID-19 pandemic efforts? I think we cannot avoid this COVID-19 questions.
Yeah, no. One of the things that we actually did, and we did this with a partner called Conversa Health. One of the things that we had to do once COVID-19 hit was we actually had to screen the staff and the clinicians as they were coming into work. And when we started it, it's like, the questionnaire is like, have you traveled outside of the country? In the last few days, do you have a fever? And the first day that they had to come back and do this, it was all done on paper, and we had lines out the door. And so we were able to quickly build a tool that it was a screening tool questionnaire that they could actually fill out and show it on their phone, and it would actually show whether or not they could come into work, or they had to come in with a mask, or no, you should stay home. And so that's one of the tools that we built. And in fact, we're actually about to try and deploy something like that for our patients and for visitors when we expect to open up more broadly again, hopefully sometime in the next few weeks.
Well, thank you so much. Any other questions from our other speakers? Sujata, Kalyan?
Yeah, I have one, Ed, for you. So I actually have two. One is, it looks like your smart and FHIR applications are primarily using the data from Epic. Do you ever see a world where you will be pulling data from other FHIR stores?
Yeah, so the Bridge app actually was the example where we were pulling some information from Epic, but the rest of the data, the visualizations, some of the precision medicine data from other research databases, from third-party cognitive, the assessment tools, those are coming from different data sources. So yeah, absolutely. That's one of the use cases that I think is going to come up a lot more in the future.
Got it. And then my second question is, do you see a future where provider systems like UCSF might actually open up that data to third-party developers?
No.
Okay.
This has come up a lot, and no. I've seen some efforts to create synthetic data based on real data sets that look statistically similar, but it is not. It's artificial data. It's not the real thing.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ed. If no more questions or any other questions, Sujata?
No.
All right, thanks, Ed. And let's move to the last presentation, my presentation. I see that we lost maybe 40% of our attendees. So thanks to everyone who stayed late. So I'll speak to about the CMS rule, though I will perhaps disappoint a little bit my Roche colleagues because I want to speak about the CMS rule, which is for the health plans, not for provider organizations and HR vendors. So let me share my screen. Hello. All right. So my name is Pavel. I don't know if I can bring my picture in somehow. Don't work. Yeah. Okay. Let's go without picture then. So my name is Pavel. I'm a CEO of company Health Samurai, and we long time health IT company and very long FHIR company. We discovered FHIR in 2012, and we've been contributing to the FHIR specification since that time. We built our own FHIR platform called 8box, and we have more than 20 enterprise projects with FHIR in production built on top of 8box. Our platform is scalable. Our largest implementation right now has 1.5 million patients in one database, and we built and our clients built quite comprehensive applications on top of 8box, like mainly EHR systems, but some other applications as well. And today I want to speak about CMS rule, first of all, and first CMS rule, and second how Health Samurai, what Health Samurai does to address the CMS rule. So CMS and ONC, they released the first rule, which was talking about API back in 2015. It was about EHR systems and hospitals, and back then this rule mentioned FHIR, but it didn't prescribe FHIR to be used mandatory. It created an ecosystem of FHIR applications in hospitals and on the patient side, but definitely ONC and CMS were not 100% satisfied with what they achieved, and in March of this year they released the next rule, and there was a lot of discussion about both. I want to stop today on the CMS rule, which affects CMS regulated health plans. I think it's an interesting story because CMS is bringing to the FHIR side a new type of organizations. There was, of course, FHIR implementations on the health plan side, and I will talk about it a bit later, but it's a major effort to bring FHIR to payers. The rule which they released in March had two types of API which needs to be implemented by, well, in the original writing of the rule, it was January 1st of 2021. This rule was just delayed a couple of days ago, and now the rule is enforced starting July, so it was delayed by 6 months. So there are two types of API, as I said. First is a secure API for patient access and patient-facing applications, which enforces health plans to share claims data and encounter data. It also enforces them to share clinical data they maintain. Not all of them maintain clinical data, but whatever clinical data they have has to be shared. They also should share preferred drug formularies. And there is a public part of the API. They should share their provider directories, the network of providers. The other part of the rule is applicable 1 year later. It's about health plans to exchange data per patient request. When the patient is moving from one health plan to another, it should be able to take his or her data with the patient. So per patient request, the data has to move from one health plan to another. So of course, the idea is not only to open access to this data to the patient, but also allow patients to leverage this data. And to do this, to achieve this, you can only achieve this if you enforce certain standards. And CMS has enforced, I think, very good choice of standards. They chosen HL7 FHIR version 4.0.1, the latest stable version of FHIR specification, and they also enforced smart and FHIR security specification for running patient-facing applications. As you can see on this diagram, this data is secure, this is not. It goes over public API, all of them using FHIR, but these three types of data are secured. Now, what is required by the rule? And here is the checklist for health plans, CMS regulated health plans, how they what they need to do to be compliant. So they have to share claims and encounter data within 1 business day since this claim was adjudicated. And they have to share all the claims for the services starting January 1st of 2016. Similar rule is in terms of time frame and date range is for clinical data. Clinical data is referring to the standard called USCDI, United States Core Dataset for Interoperability. It's a new dataset which was introduced in the ONC rule, which is paired with the CMS rule. It has, I think, 18 data elements, extended dataset comparing to what was in a similar dataset in the previous regulation. And again, this clinical data needs to be shared with the patient applications within 1 business day since the data was received. Of course, clinical data mostly received by health plans, they don't generate it. And again, this data needs to be collected for and made accessible for all the services starting January 1st of 2016. Drug formulary has a similar requirement. You need to share current preferred drug formularies, and again, you need to reflect the changes over API within 1 business day. Provider directory over public API has to be updated within 30 days of changes. And there are implementation guides from DaVinci and from Kalyan Alliance, which describe how exactly is this data should be formed. We actually had a very nice DaVinci use cases presentation last FHIR Meetup. If somebody wants to see this presentation, it's on the same YouTube channel. Nick Radov made this presentation about DaVinci. So one interesting thought, I think, and it's about the timelines. The rule was released in the beginning of March. It was the first day of canceled HIMSS conference in Orlando. And between March and December, there were less than 10 months. Now, CMS totally understood how hard it is to develop this functionality, and still it enforced health plans to make this rule to make all the infrastructure and all the API access for this rule within such a short period of time. And when I say they totally understood it, they really did, because they ran a similar project, which many I'm sure know. It's called Blue Button 2.0. It is the project was run by CMS, which enabled Medicare beneficiaries, Medicare fee-for-service insurance. They were able to access the Medicare claims, and it was a very successful project. This ecosystem of Blue Button 2.0 applications has grown significantly. Now they have more than 50 apps, and it gave great reference to the CMS. Like they totally understood how much efforts it needs to the health plan need to apply to achieve the compliance, and how much time the health plan would need to build such a solution. And my thinking, why exactly is this time frame is such short, is actually because right now on the market, the market of FHIR application solutions for FHIR is very mature. I mean, we just saw excellent presentation from Google, but they are not the only one which provides FHIR infrastructure. And today I want to speak about how what Health Samurai is doing for compliance, what we are offering for health plan to be compliant with this rule. So we built a FHIR platform for health plans, and it comprises of 3 components, and 2 of these components are actually very mature. These are the solutions which we built and used in many other installations and applications. So first component of this platform is 8-box FHIR server, our FHIR backend, which as I mentioned, used in 20 plus production installations. The other component, which is pre-built and was existed for several years, is infrastructure component of 8-box, which provides monitoring dashboards and audits logs. The new thing which we built specifically for FHIR platform for health plans is actually a FHIR platform, FHIR portal. It's a web portal which has designated areas for all the stakeholders, all the participants of the workflow described in the CMS rule. So let's talk first how we do installations. So 8-box, which is our FHIR server, it can be deployed to any public or private cloud. It can be deployed on premises. We host it in Kubernetes cluster, and right now we have already clients in AWS, in Google Cloud Platform. We have clients in Microsoft Azure which use 8-box, and Kubernetes is supported by all these cloud providers out of the box. Also, it is possible to deploy Kubernetes on premises. So whatever infrastructure health plan is using, we can deploy 8-box side by side with other solutions that are used by the health plan. Now let's talk a little bit about what is the implementation process. So after our FHIR platform is installed to the cloud or infrastructure of the health plan, we are looking for data sources that need to be that we can use as a data source for claims and clinical data. The good source of this data might be actually existing flows and logs of these flows between providers and health plan FHIR platform. Actually, existing health plan systems, and of course, flows which are related to financial side are goes in HL7 in X12 protocol, X12 EDI protocol. It's mostly 837, 835 claims and claim response messages, and clinical data is can be transferred in HL7 v2 messages. And again, here we can use a pre-built components adapters of 8-box, which we use in other projects. Our HL7 to FHIR adapter, HL7 version 2 to FHIR adapter, and X12 EDI to FHIR adapter. X12 EDI we built when we developed EHR systems. We built a billing module for one of our clients, and we built billing module on FHIR, but of course, when this billing module works with clearinghouses and insurance companies, all the data has to be translated to X12 EDI. 8box, when data is injected, it validates all the data for qualities, validates the structure of data that it's compliant with FHIR 4.0.1. It validates using of correct terminology, etc. As soon as the data gets to 8box, it becomes immediately available to over FHIR API. But as we discussed, some of this data needs to be secured, and in this case, the next step of implementation we do is we need to integrate authorization workflow, and it depends if a health plan has an authorization server which supports OAuth 2.0 and OpenID Connect, which are needed. Then it is possible to use existing authorization server. If this server does not exist, then we can bring our own authorization server. Again, it's a pre-built component which was used in pretty much every applications built on top of 8box, and customize authorization flow with 8box authorization server. One additional effort we always do is integration of member portal and API manager into the same with the same authorization server to have a single sign-on. Of course, it will be very inconvenient if the patient has to log in to his or her portal and to log in for accessing API with different passwords. The last part of implementation, I want to describe the web portal, which we provide to all stakeholders of this workflow, which is described by the CMS. And so the first party is third-party application vendors. They can go to the FHIR portal and see the instructions, guidance, how to register their apps. And they can register their apps, they can receive client ID and client secret to participate in authorization flow with authorization server. Then the second second area is for health plan members. They have a web page where they would consent to share the information with a third-party app. And we also provide them with a page where they can actually see which apps they authorized to access their data, and which apps and how these apps are actually using the API. So they have a full log of how a third-party app is using the API, and if they are unhappy with certain activity on the application side, they can cancel the access token, and the application will not be able to use this patient data anymore. And we also provide a web portal area for administrators of the health plan. So what it gives to them, they can see the activity of the whole system. They can see what's going on, what is the load, for instance, of the API on the hardware. If the API is functioning properly, it's actually one of the requirements on the CMS to have testing and monitoring of the API to make sure that it's active and working continuously. They can see all the log of every event in the system, like what's happening, and they can investigate if they have any suspicious activity. if they discover that certain app have a significant threat to maybe a health plan PHI or some solutions inside health plan network, they have a right to deny this application from access to the API as a health plan. And again, this is described in the CMS rule. So this is what we do. And again, as you could see, the rule is new and kind of looks strict and has a lot of things to do, but it allowed only 10 months to support this rule. And I think the main reason is because the ecosystem of FHIR solution is very mature, and any health plan can actually find FHIR vendors which would satisfy these requirements within this time frame. This is it. Thank you for watching my presentation, and I would be happy to answer questions.
Hey, Pavel, I'll go first. So the MPI model in the 8-box, is it a built-in module or can you integrate with third-party MPI solutions?
Yeah, sure. We can integrate with third-party MPI solutions, and we know there are companies which build very innovative, actually, MPI. You mean MPI, right? Master Patient Index.
Yes, master patient index.
Yeah, like for instance, like we worked with company Virata in one of our projects. They developed really innovative MPI solution. They basically created a database like getting data from sources for all the US population. And when they try to identify patients, they not only like compare two parts of data they have for every patient, but they can compare this new data set to the whole data they have about the US population and find this patient, even if like there is no intersections between two data sets. So yes, we totally work with MPI vendors if there is a complex use case and it's beneficial, right? In other cases, we use our own MPI module.
Okay, got it.
Hey, Pavel, question for you. For the folks that have deployed, or what are the most frequent ways that people have deployed 8-box? Is it on-prem, cloud infrastructure? I mean, you don't have to give me numbers, but just I'm curious if people are doing container-based deployments.
Yeah, so it's a good question. As I said, like we have a whole variety. Most of our clients are in the cloud, but yes, there are healthcare organizations, actually very big names, which keep their own on-premises data centers, and it takes more efforts to support on-premises installations. But yeah, we totally can do this. I would say 80% maybe is in the cloud, and 20% is on-prem. We don't want to disrupt processes in the organizations which they used to have, right? And if they use on-premises deployment, we are happy to accommodate this. We always offer, if you want to move to the cloud, like have plans, it can be your first step, right? And we can deploy 8-box into the cloud, connected with your on-premises infrastructure, and then you will be able to start moving maybe to the cloud, like use it as a proof of concept, or right. Any other question in the chat? Right, don't have any questions. I can wait another. Can you speak of a few use cases where plans are interested? So this is a use case which I'm describing is specifically to be compliant with the CMS rule. Of course, 8box provides much bigger capabilities, and if you implement it to be compliant, it doesn't mean that you have to stop there. You can actually put your API to use and build applications on top of 8box, or pick best-in-class FHIR applications from the market and implement in your organization. Yes, we have organizations that use our products. Yes. Well, the question was, do we have organizations using our products? Yes, we have a whole variety of different clients. We have EHR vendors, quite a lot of them building new EHR systems. We work with large health systems, like we work with, for instance, Yale University. Work with a couple of pharmaceutical companies as well. And there is a question in health dev chat. So no, 8box, it's our own file server. It does not integrate with Firestore. We built 8box on PostgreSQL database. We leverage PostgreSQL advanced features like JSON binary to store FHIR data. We allow SQL queries against all the FHIR data inside the 8box right away without extracting it somewhere else. In fact, all our FHIR API queries are translated to SQL queries when they are performed by 8box. CDI data scattered processors. So the question is about US CDI data scattered across resources. Is the expectation in the model presented here that the smart app would have to gather data from the various regional FHIR resources? So there is an implementation guide which describes how US CDI data is stored. Yes, it uses different FHIR resources, but it's also beneficial to be able to access only the data you need sometimes, not like a document model. All right, I think this is it for me. You guys want to turn on your camera, say bye to everyone, and we can maybe wrap it up.
Yeah, for sure. Pavel, thanks for organizing this. This was a good opportunity to share and also learn a lot from you guys.
So I'll send a follow-up questionnaire to collect feedback. There was a lot of questions about the slides and presentations. If you guys don't mind to share slides, please do. I will publish them. If any objections, let me know. There was a question in chat about Kalyan contact information. So yeah, like.
Yeah, what is the best way to share it?
Well, ideally, if you can share slides, we'll just put slides. If not,
Yep.
Share your contact information. I'll put it there as well.
Yep, will do. Thanks for organizing, Pavel. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Thank you, Pavel.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it was tough like to sit for 3 hours. I learned, but it was very nice also to have you. Thank you so much for joining me, and perhaps we have the next one, I don't know, maybe in Google or somewhere else, or offline or online again if the situation stays longer. We'll see how it goes, but let's continue.
Yeah, hopefully we'll meet in person at some point.
Well, thanks, Ed. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Bye-bye.